Welcome to another special episode of our Mandatory Mental Liberation series, produced by Baba Jelani Bomani Dembe, founder of Majestic Mind Matters University. I'm your royal narrator, Queen Magical Melanin, for this new episode titled, Generational Reparations, Self-Identity Theft is Real, Restorative Actions Required, a message about true respect from a melanin-rich culture royal elder. The necessity of the Mandatory Mental Liberation series at Majestic Mind Matters University lies in our focus on serving our melanin-rich culture communities. By addressing the importance of knowledge of self to produce greater self-awareness and advocating for our mental liberation, but especially for our precious melanin-rich culture children, our messages aims to combat the enduring effects of generational mental enslavement stemming from the historical trauma of the chattel enslavement of the ancestors. Our initiative seeks to empower us to break free from these harmful and unfavorable legacies and cultivate a deep-rooted sense of self-identity and unwavering resilience. Throughout history, our melanin-rich culture people have been subjected to systemic oppression and exploitation, which has resulted in the generational victimization of self-identity theft. One of the most common and egregious forms of this victimization was chattel enslavement of our ancestors, which not only dehumanized and exploited them, but also stripped away their sense of self and cultural identity. The damages caused by this systemic wrong are still evident today, as many of us continue to struggle with issues of self-worth, self-acceptance, and self-identity. In order to address these historical injustices and systemic wrongs, compensation is required to begin the process of healing and reclamation of our true identities. Chattel enslavement of our ancestors was a brutal and dehumanizing practice that sought to strip individuals of their humanity, agency, and cultural identity. For generations, our melanin-rich culture people were forced to work in inhumane conditions, treated as property rather than people, and subjected to physical, emotional, and psychological abuse. This dehumanization and exploitation not only impacted our ancestors who were enslaved, but also had a lasting impact on their descendants, who continue to grapple with the trauma and legacy of this systemic wrong. One of the key damages caused by chattel enslavement of our ancestors was the erasure and distortion of our cultural identities. Our ancestors were forcibly ripped from their homelands, languages, and traditions, and were forced to adopt the customs and beliefs of the oppressors. This loss of cultural identity has had a profound impact on our sense of self and belonging, leading to feelings of alienation, insecurity, and disconnection from our roots. We still struggle with issues of self-acceptance and self-worth as we grapple with the unfavorable legacy of chattel enslavement and the ongoing effects of systemic oppression. The systematic enslavement of millions of our melanin-rich culture ancestors and descendants through chattel enslavement has left deep and lasting wounds on our melanin-rich communities around the world. One of the most devastating consequences of this horrific chapter in human history is the self-identity theft that has been inflicted upon generations of melanin-rich culture descendants. This self-identity theft has taken many forms, from forced disconnection from our cultural heritage and traditions to the perpetuation of economic exploitation and institutional racism that continue to plague our melanin-rich culture communities today. One of the most tragic aspects of chattel enslavement of the ancestors is the loss of cultural heritage and identity that it brought about. Our enslaved ancestors were forcibly ripped from our homeland, torn away from their families, and stripped of our languages, customs, and traditions. As a result, descendants today find ourselves disconnected from our roots, struggling to piece together fragments of our heritage and reclaim a sense of cultural identity that was violently stolen from us. This loss of connection to our cultural heritage has produced profound psychological consequences, leading to feelings of alienation, disorientation, and a deep sense of loss that has been passed down through generations. Furthermore, the trauma inflicted by chattel enslavement of the ancestors has left a lasting impact on the mental health of our melanin-rich culture descendants. The brutal conditions of chattel enslavement of the ancestors, characterized by physical violence, sexual abuse, and dehumanization, inflicted profound psychological scars on our enslaved ancestors. This trauma has been passed down through generations, contributing to high rates of mental health issues such as post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety within our melanin-rich culture communities. The unfavorable legacy of chattel enslavement of the ancestors continues to manifest in the form of intergenerational trauma, with us grappling with the psychological repercussions of the ancestors' suffering. Moreover, the economic exploitation that was central to chattel enslavement of the ancestors has had long-lasting consequences for our communities. Our enslaved ancestors were treated as property, their labor forcibly exploited for the profit of the enslavers without any compensation. This economic exploitation laid the foundation for generational poverty and economic disparities within our melanin-rich culture communities that persist to this day. The wealth that was accumulated through the unpaid labor of our enslaved ancestors has been passed down through generations, perpetuating economic inequality and social marginalization within our melanin-rich culture communities. In addition to the economic and psychological impacts, the unfavorable legacy of chattel enslavement of the ancestors has also perpetuated systemic racism and discrimination against our descendants. The dehumanization and exploitation of our enslaved ancestors created a lasting, unfavorable legacy of prejudice and discrimination that continues to inform social attitudes and institutions today. Our melanin-rich culture communities continue to face disparities in education, healthcare, housing, employment, and criminal justice as a result of this entrenched racism, perpetuating cycles of poverty and marginalization that are difficult to break. The generational self-identity theft inflicted upon our melanin-rich culture communities through chattel enslavement on the ancestors has had far-reaching and devastating consequences. The loss of our cultural heritage and identity, the trauma and psychological damage, the economic exploitation, the institutional racism and discrimination, and the intergenerational trauma that have resulted from this dark chapter in global history continue to impact us today. It is essential that we acknowledge and address the lasting effects of chattel enslavement of the ancestors on our melanin-rich culture communities in order to work towards healing and justice for all those who have been affected by this profound injustice. Compensation is required to address the systemic wrongs and damages caused by chattel enslavement of the ancestors and generational victimization of self-identity theft. This compensation should take many forms, including, but not limited to financial reparations, educational initiatives, cultural preservation efforts, and mental health support services. Financial reparations can help to address the economic disparities and inequalities that have persisted for generations, while educational initiatives can help to reclaim and preserve our cultural heritage and histories. Cultural preservation efforts can help to rebuild and restore our sense of identity and belonging, while mental health support services can provide much-needed healing for the trauma and intergenerational effects of chattel enslavement of the ancestors. Compensation is required to address the systemic wrongs and damages caused by chattel enslavement of the ancestors and generational victimization of self-identity theft. The repercussions of chattel enslavement of the ancestors and the self-identity theft have permeated through generations, leaving lasting scars on us and our melanin-rich culture communities. It is imperative that steps are taken to acknowledge and rectify these wrongs through various forms of compensation, including financial reparations, educational initiatives, cultural preservation efforts, and mental health support services. Financial reparations are a crucial component of addressing the economic disparities and inequalities that have persisted for generations as a result of chattel enslavement of the ancestors. The economic impact of chattel enslavement of the ancestors is evident in the wealth disparities between us and white communities in the United States. Generations of us were denied the opportunity to build wealth through property ownership, education, and employment opportunities, resulting in economic disadvantages that continue to be felt today. Financial reparations can help to level the playing field and provide much-needed resources to address the economic injustices stemming from chattel enslavement of the ancestors. Educational initiatives are also essential in reclaiming and preserving our cultural heritage and histories that have been erased or distorted by the effects of chattel enslavement of the ancestors. The education system in the United States has long overlooked the contributions and experiences of ours in shaping American history and identity. By implementing educational programs that accurately depict the unfavorable legacy of chattel enslavement of the ancestors and its ongoing impact, we can empower our melanin-rich culture people to reclaim our heritage and challenge the prevailing narratives that have marginalized our voices for centuries. Cultural preservation efforts are another critical aspect of compensation for the harms inflicted by chattel enslavement of the ancestors and self-identity theft. The erasure of our culture and traditions has perpetuated a sense of disconnection and loss among our melanin-rich culture people who have been stripped of our ancestral roots. By investing in cultural preservation initiatives, we can rebuild and restore our sense of identity and belonging, honoring the resilience and creativity of our melanin-rich culture communities in the face of historical trauma. These efforts can help to reaffirm the value and significance of our melanin-rich culture in the fabric of American society. Mental health support services are also essential in addressing the trauma and intergenerational effects of chattel enslavement of the ancestors that have been passed down through generations. The psychological impact of chattel enslavement of the ancestors and self-identity theft has led to high rates of mental health disorders, including depression, anxiety, and PTSD among us. By providing access to culturally competent mental health services, we can facilitate healing and resilience in our communities that have long been marginalized and underserved. These services can help us navigate the complexities of our experiences and empower us to reclaim our agency and sense of self-worth. Compensation for the systemic wrongs and damages caused by chattel enslavement and generational victimization of self-identity theft must take various forms to address the multifaceted impacts of these injustices. Financial reparations, educational initiatives, cultural preservation efforts, and mental health support services are all essential components of a comprehensive approach to addressing the historical traumas inflicted on us. By acknowledging America's dark past and investing in the well-being and empowerment of our affected melanin-rich culture communities, we can begin to heal the wounds of chattel enslavement of the ancestors and strive towards a more equitable and just society for us as well. In conclusion, our melanin-rich culture people are generational victims of self-identity theft due to the systemic wrongs and damages caused by chattel enslavement of our ancestors. The erasure and distortion of our cultural identities has had a lasting impact on our sense of self and belonging, leading to issues of self-acceptance and self-worth. Compensation is required to address these historical injustices and systemic wrongs, and to begin the process of healing and reclamation of our true identities. By acknowledging the unfavorable legacy of chattel enslavement of the ancestors and working towards reparative justice, we can begin to heal the wounds caused by America's dark past and build a more equitable and just future for us as well. I'm your royal narrator, Queen Magical Melanin. We trust that you have expanded your understanding through the insights shared by Baba Jelani Bomani Dembe, founder of Majestic Mind Matters University, in our mandatory mental liberation series message titled Generational Reparations. Self-identity theft is real. Restorative actions required. Remember this, it is essential to honor the ancestors. We have a unique connection to the ancestors. They endured many unwarranted struggles, preserved our melanin-rich culture, and passed down invaluable wisdom through many generations. By honoring the ancestors, we pay honorable tribute to our roots and draw great strength and much-needed inspiration from the unwavering resilience and royal legacy that has paved the way for our present and future generations. Ancestral reverence is a powerful way for us to continually uphold our own melanin-rich identity, heritage, and cultural legacy. Here is an ancient Alkebulan proverb to keep in mind. If you think you are too small to make a difference, you have not spent the night with a mosquito. Remember this as well, whenever you are in the presence of anyone, saying, they don't see color, it actually means they don't see you. As a member of our melanin-rich culture, you must strive for knowledge of self for greater personal awareness. Always treat yourself kindly and seek to live a totally awesome and gloriously fulfilling melanin-rich culture life. So, like, subscribe, and share this very special melanin-rich culture link with everyone that you care about and that really cares about you and all of yours as well, and thank you for listening. Ashe.